During the Great Depression, the New Deal Works Projects Administration, WPA, used unemployed writers and researchers from the Federal Writers Project to interview and document the stories of surviving African Americans who have been part of the American slave system up until the 13th Amendment. Produced between 1936 and 1938, the narratives retell the experiences of more than 2,300 former slaves.
Just to piggyback, I feel a connection too, and I don't necessarily read this and not see the anger in it. I see some deep resentment and anger, but we're dealing with, first of all, a man who's 86 years old, and I don't know about, I'm sure in your families you have some older people and you get together, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or whatever, and they're telling stories, and even if the story is about something bad that happened, it might be a humorous story in the moment, even though they're talking about some really bad incident that happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. I've had that experience with family members in my family. So I can see this, he's an 86-year-old man and he's recounting some things that he went through. And just in the general recounting of it, the anger doesn't necessarily come out in his language. And, he doesn't feel the need to have to, I guess, be overt with his anger. I think from his perspective, it's like, I don't really need to paint this with any emotion. You just look at what I'm telling you and you understand.
And he states it
what
in the
we
second
went through.
paragraph. We got mighty bad treatment. I mean, you don't say that and not have any type of anger, regret, all those negative feelings that come with that statement.
Right.
So,
But you don't necessarily have to be burning with anger all the time. I mean, because imagine if we were that way,
within himself.
we all just would have exploded, hundreds of years ago in slavery. If we let it really get to us that way, and that points to an aspect, I think, of, and it's interesting that African people and African American people didn't react in that way. And I think it's interesting too that he talks about at least one point where he says, "I ain't no man for telling false stories." So he's identifying with being a righteous man. So even though he went through all of this stuff, and we talked about being conditioned, obviously it didn't really penetrate the spirit of who this man was. He was still able to come out of all of this with a sense of honesty and integrity, which I think says a lot for Mr. Jacob Manson, and says a lot for African people that went through this system, our ancestors, people in our family that came up through this. And it's just very interesting. I think it needs more study to understand how is that possible that these people went through all of this and it didn't really tarnish their spirit and their psyche.
Now, see, that's something I would love to know.
How did they not come out of this as just completely insane and pathological themselves?
Okay. Yeah, I'll pick up. Another master named Jimmy Shaw owned a pretty slave gal, nearly wife, and he kept her. His wife caught him in a cabin in bed with her. His wife said something to him about it, and he cussed his wife. She told him she had caught him in the act. She went back to the great house and got a gun. When the master came in the great house, she told him he must let slave girls alone, that he belonged to her. She told him he must let slave girls alone, that he belonged to her. He cussed her again and said she would have to tend to her own damn business and he would tend to his. They had a big fuss, and then Master Shaw started towards her. She grabbed the gun and let him have it. She shot him dead in the hall. They had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 married daughter. Mrs. Shaw took her 2 sons and left. A married daughter and her husband took charge of the place. Mrs. and her sons never come back as I know of.
There we go. Perfect example. We were just talking about that. I said, what would happen if they actually fought back? I'm like, okay. Well, she said, you belong. She's told her husband, you belong to me. I'm look, high five for the wife. I'm sorry. I'm just like, hey, high five for her.
Right.
She was like, look, get out of their bed. You're my husband. You should not be with
Right.
these slave women, you know? And she was not passive to the point of, okay, well, she was like, okay, all right, play with it. So, hey, I love that.
Yeah.
In a morbid kind of way. I know y'all like, they took someone's life, but
That's the 2011 woman, okay?
look, asterisk.
But that's like, as far as, you know, what he's telling us about the white people at that time, that's like the first, you know, real glimpse of their true humanity.
Yeah.
Because this is, of course, she would react that way. That's how she should react.
I've never heard a story like this before. I've never heard.
That's how any woman today is going to react to some extent. You know, don't let it be a gun in the house and you catch your
I
husband.
wouldn't take it
with
to the
another
gun
woman.
level, but
Maybe if
So-
you caught him in the bed, that could be a possibility if a gun is
Well,
around. But yeah.
temporary insanity is what we
Yeah.
call it.
Exactly.
I'm going to throw something out. Feel free to shoot it down.
Yeah.
Feel free. I'm just,
Pun intended.
yeah. But do you think on some plantations, not clearly not all, because, you know, do you think that it was kind of like almost a conditioning of the wife with some slave masters where, you know, they would sit here and say, the wife would say, what are you doing messing with the slave girls? And the husband might say, they're animals. It's like masturbation. It's not even a human being.
Oh my goodness.
Do you think it was something like that? Because
For them to allow it? Well, not allow
well-
it, but
I've seen how in my readings of like other societies throughout the world, how they feel about those who they think are beneath them. You know, it's similar to this as far as whether it's property or whether it's, you know, just I guess leave it at that, property. But I guess that's one way of looking at it, to me at least. You know, to get the wife to see that, yeah, we really don't even, they're not even human. But really it's like, oh, well, if my wife was built like that, then I wouldn't go anywhere. But these, I need that, you know. So, you know, clearly, I guess in putting my own personality in it, you're not going to be sexually attracted to anything that you don't like.
Right.
That you don't like. So, you know,
Yeah.
get the wife to believe that they're really not, you know,
Yeah.
they're beneath my notice. You know, it's just
Right.
something to do. But in reality, it's like, hey, you know,
Yeah.
I've been here like 50 other nights. We have like 5 other kids out in the plantation. I'm coming back again.
Right.
You know,
And so,
Regardless of what is happening, slavery time, 2011, what have you.
Yeah.
Anytime a man steps out on a woman, whether they are married, boyfriend and girlfriend, it does something to the woman. I mean, she feels less than, and I don't care what picture they paint. She had a problem with that. Even,
Right, I
you know, when
agree.
you talk about, they always talk about Marilyn Monroe with President Kennedy. Miss Kennedy, she had a problem, Jackie. She didn't like that. You don't even like the rumors that are associated with it. And these women, they knew for a fact because they had the children to prove it.
my
So,
goodness.
I mean,
and I read this and say, okay, this is probably, like you said, the 10th time she's caught him. And this is the point where she's going to get the gun. I don't think this is the first time, and she's never had this idea that her husband was doing this. I think that, you know,
temporary insanity.
to get back to your point, you know, when you're talking about, was there this kind of agreement, this tacit agreement between the slave master and his wife?
yeah, I don't want to really say Greek, but I know-
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was as openly as,
Yeah.
you know, a discussion like
Yeah.
that.
over coffee. And,
Yeah,
you know,
She was mad every
No.
time he left, okay?
But I think there was definitely an understanding. Understand may not be the right word. Everybody knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody knew. I don't think it was a secret. And obviously, when the children come along,
Yeah.
if you try to, again, this gets to the pathology of it. How many people were just pretending that this wasn't going on, but knowing at the same time it was going on?
Were they
But a
really
lot of these masters, they love these women, these
Some
slaves.
did.
They love them.
What do you mean
So-
love them? Like,
Look at the Thomas Jefferson story, that one with his slave, and those, they fought to be acknowledged in
Well,
his, I mean,
I
I,
would-
think they loved him
I
in a
would, I would,
twisted way.
I would
don't
change
know
one
about
word
Not
from a
all of
lot to maybe
Oh,
a few.
I very
But a
like,
Had genuine feelings for these
Yeah.
women.
Okay, a few.
I would say for the most part, these were men
opportunity.
taking advantage of the opportunity
I
of
can-
being in a
okay.
powerful position and having access to women who are
Exactly.
completely powerless.
Exactly.
And anytime you have that kind of a situation, you're going to have this kind of behavior. You see it today. Rape is now a weapon of war around the world. And it's because anytime you have men in powerful positions and they have weapons and they're taking over a community and they now have access to the women who have no power, unfortunately, we haven't advanced as humanity to the point where, men can control themselves in that situation. And it's sad but true, but that's what happens. It even happens with, we look at the Abu Ghraib incident in Iraq, where you had, mostly male soldiers having mostly all male prisoners performing these weird, acts and putting them in sexual positions and just this sick sexuality that comes out when all of a sudden you find yourself in a position of power. Again, that's something that is deep and it needs to be studied. But I think that's what happened in slavery. You had men with power, they took advantage of it.
An opportunity.
Okay.
And here we are.
Okay.